Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I am going to take a first look and page through Dungeons & Dragons, Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk from Wizards of the Coast. This is written by Amanda Heyman, Richard Baker, Itan Bernstein, Mackenzie Diarmas, Ron Lundeen, and Chris Perkins. My apologies if I've somehow mispronounced any of those names. This 224-page hardcover arrives in stores on September 19th. It's going to carry an MSRP of $59.95. Now, currently, you can pre-order the physical and digital editions together through D&D Beyond for that very same $59.95. So keep that in mind. All right, all that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got D&D, Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. Now, there are a few things I'm going to mention before we jump on in, but before I do, let me also mention that stay tuned, keep watching, because I am going to let you know how you can get into the running to win this limited art edition of Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. Or I guess maybe it's just an alternate art edition. Maybe not, it's not considered a limited art edition. But regardless, you can get into the running to win this. Like all my contests, I'll make it easy to take part. And I should also point out that if I can legally ship this to your country from the United States, you can get into the contest. This is not a contest that is only open for viewers in the US or in North America, because I know we've got people who follow the channel all over the world. So keep that in mind. All right, back to this edition. So first of all, the fine folks over at Wizards of the Coast were kind enough to send me both of these review copies. And neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this coverage with you. These days, it's very important that you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the Shattered Obelisk, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what's in this adventure book. And this just showed up about 20 minutes ago. So I quickly put together the opening graphic, came down here into the Duct Tape Studios, and we are off and running. So I know very little about this outside of it's a reworking of the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is an excellent introductory 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons adventure that came with the starter set. So I know we've got that, but then it builds upon that. So it takes the adventure way further on. And I do understand that there's been some changes as well. Lastly, this is an adventure book. So if you're a player hoping that your dungeon master is going to pick up the Shattered Obelisk, you might want to tune out now. Even though this is going to be as new to me as it is to you, there are probably going to be some spoilers. We are going to see some things as I flip through some of the book. It's going to spoil different little aspects of the adventure. So if you don't want that to happen, I would definitely recommend tune out now. But you might want to let your dungeon master know about this video, because then they can approach Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk, with a little more information so they can make a much more informed buying decision to see if they want to pick up this adventure book. All right, so let's take a look at the back here. What lurks below Phandelver? A beloved town is in unimaginable danger. Whether the heroes are newcomers to Phandelver or are returning after the acclaimed Dungeons & Dragons adventure Lost Mine of Phandelver, they discover hints of a threat lurking below the town. The heroes soon learn that the cult of a malevolent entity has set its sights on transforming Phandelver into the capital of its evil empire. To save the town from oblivion, the heroes must uncover a nefarious plot and confront the otherworldly cultists. Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk is a high fantasy adventure that begins with the familiar story of Lost Mine of Phandelver and then delves into the perilous Underdark, where dangerous secrets fester and evil is afoot. Now, this adventure is going to take characters from 1st to 12th level, which is a nice range for the adventure. Now, strangely enough, I'm going to bring this back over here for a second. This alternate art edition gives away the big bads, or at least some of the big bads, right there on the cover. It's kind of like, oh, okay. And I spotted that right away. I actually think this cover is very cool. And for some reason, it kind of gives me Poison Ivy from DC Comics vibe. But before we jump on in, I also want to point out that it's my understanding this is kind of got some cosmic horror aspects to it. And I'm almost wondering, now I highly doubt there's a Lovecraftian angle to things, but I'm kind of curious if we get something that's along the lines of like a color out of space, because this alternate art edition sort of has that kind of decadent growth, sort of corrupted growth look to it that I associate with the color out of space. So I'm kind of curious. I'm sure I'm absolutely off my nut as far as that goes, but I'm kind of curious about that. All right, so we've got a lot of illustrators. I'm not going to read all of their names, but do want to make sure they get some credit. So we've got loads and loads of them here. So what I'm going to look to do is I'm going to look to kind of flip through. Once again, we're not going to look at every page, but I'm going to try to stop so I can take a look to see if we've got a bit of a synopsis of what's going on in each of the chapters. It looks like we've got 8 chapters, as well as a couple of appendices. One is a bestiary, the other is magic items. And it looks like we've got some sort of a story tracker. I think there's also a map in the book, so we will find out in just a bit. So welcome to Phandelver. At least that's how I've always pronounced it. Nestled on the northern Sword Coast between Neverwinter Wood and the Sword Mountains is a town of Phandelver. Centuries ago, Phandelver was a thriving settlement with deep ties to its neighboring communities. But then bandits overran the town and Phandelver lay abandoned for centuries. Only in the past few years have settlers built a new village on the ruins of the old. These townsfolk hope to grow Phandelver through hard work, camaraderie, and the shared purpose of building a lasting home. Threatening their efforts and their survival are bandits, brigands, and monsters. And then talking about the threats from below, right there I can spot the spoiler from the cover. So we have the adventure summary split into 2 halves. A Lost Mine, which is a reimagining of the Lost Mine of Phandelver adventure. And then we've got the Obelisk. So chapters 1 through 4 are the mine. So once again, it's kind of a reimagining of the original starter set adventure. And then all new material, chapters 5 through 8, with the Obelisk, which I also understand that those mysterious black obelisks that have appeared in many of the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons adventures are going to be addressed. So as far as the mine portion of the adventure, I do understand that some of the NPCs have had their genders changed. There's been some racial changes as well. I've seen some people complaining online about it. I don't know. I mean, is that really worth getting worked up about? To me, that just seems just silly and bizarre. And if somebody gets all worked up about something like that, then I don't think they're really playing much 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons anyway. All right, so let's get into chapter 1, A Dangerous Journey. This chapter begins with a goblin ambush on the road to Phandelver, leaving it up to the characters to chase their attackers to a cave lair before getting into the adventurer's events take a few minutes to do the following. Have the characters introduce themselves, see what their connection is to Gundren, who, if memory serves me correctly, is a dwarf that hires the player characters to travel with him. He's got a supply wagon or supply wagons. It's been a long time since I read that adventure. In fact, it would have been all the way back when that starter set first came out and I reviewed it. Then we also have transportation details. Ask the players how their characters are traveling. The Cragmaw hideout. That map looks the same. It doesn't look like anything's changed there. I do believe we have some new artwork even in these early chapters. So next chapter is Trouble in Phandelver. In this chapter, the characters meet important townspeople who become their quest givers and friends throughout the adventure. By the time the Mind Flayer fanatics plot, spoilers, against Phandelver becomes clear in later chapters, the character's attachment to one or more NPCs in town should encourage them to save it. For now, consider portraying the townsfolk as friendly and curious about the adventures to encourage these ties. Yes, murder hobos need not apply. Red Band Ruffians. Within a day or so of the adventurer's arrival in Phandelver, a confrontation with the Red Brands becomes inevitable. This can happen in several different ways. Confronting the Red Brands, investigating the manor, or the Red Brands just confront the player characters. I'm trying to remember, I think they were, the Red Bands were kind of punks. I might be wrong. All right, so this should be the manor, right? Oh, their hideout. Yes. The Red Brand hideout. I've seen that artwork before. So we've got goblins, we've got bandits. Chapter 3, The Spider's Web. This chapter takes place in the wilds surrounding Phandelver, a region known as the Tribord Trail. The area is composed of foothills and rolling, sparsely wooded plains that extend between the Sword Mountains to the south and Neverwinter Wood to the north. The area gains its name from an old trail that runs from the distant town of Tribord to the east, winding westward about 100 miles through the abandoned village of Conyberry, then running north of Phandelver on its way to the high road along the coast. So, player characters should be about third level when we get here. And you're going to be using the overland map. Now, one thing I'm sort of curious about, and of course, once I read through this and provide my review for Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk, I'm kind of curious if this is still presented in a way where early on in this book, we're looking at kind of teaching how to run a D&D adventure, a 5e D&D adventure. I'm sort of curious. I'm going to take a guess, no. I think that's probably part of the reimagining of Lost Mine of Phandelver, is that it's not really presented as a learning adventure any longer. So one thing I have to say, the introductory adventures in both the starter set as well as the essentials kit were really well done. They were really nice introductions to Dungeons and Dragons, and they covered enough of the bases as well to give people a good feel for how how Dungeons and Dragons adventures unfold. Ah, spectator, I think. Yes, it is a spectator. Chapter 5. Now, this is where we start getting into the new content. This chapter can be divided into two parts. the investigations around Phandelver and the hunt for Ruzithid. The goblins left 4 distinct crime scenes that the characters can investigate in any order. Each crime scene has at least 1 witness and 1 potential combat encounter. From these crime scenes, the characters should gather enough clues to point them towards Ruzithid, the goblins' leader, without whom the goblins' crimes would cease. Pursuing Ruzithid takes the characters into Zorzula's Rest. This section is a traditional dungeon crawl, yay! Filled with strange secrets to uncover and dangerous enemies to fight. I do like the cartography that we see in many of the 5th edition adventures. I think these are really nicely done. Easy to understand. There's enough detail to them that they stand out, but there isn't so much detail where you can't really make out the keys, which I do see from time to time with adventures, where it's kind of like, wow, that is a cool map, but running the game is really the big thing here. All right, so here we've got the Shattered Obelisk. Let's see, where is our running the chapter? Here it is. This chapter begins with a few opportunities for heroics in town, but 3 separate dungeons are the focus. The abandoned temple of Talhundrathirth. Hey, you know me. I'm just here to mispronounce fictional people, places, and things. That is my thing. What else do we have here? The Haunted Crypt of the Tulhund and the subterranean Gibbet Crossing. I'll describe later in this chapter. The locations of each dungeon are crudely marked on the map that the characters found at the end of the previous chapter. Gwen Orsong tells the characters more about these locations in the Return to Phandelver section. The characters can't enter the crypt without passing through Talhundrathirth, but they might approach Gibbet Crossing before or after they explore the temple and crypt. All right, Daisy the cow with some mutations. I'm telling you. There's going to be like a color out of space vibe in here. I just have that feeling. Because there's the corruption of the town. There's rules for the corruption of the town. It's I'm telling you, it's just a vibe I got. Just when I heard there's cosmic horror and there are town corruption rules, I'm like, it's gonna be something. It's gonna be something. It's gonna be mutating them in some way. All right, just kind of flipping on through. Here's the crypt of the Talhund. I have the impression that this is going to be pretty good. And you're probably going to think I'm kind of strange for saying this, but from my experience now, remember, I have been covering the hobby for almost 14 years now. It seems to me that when Wizards of the Coast is very confident in a release, they tend to get it out into reviewers' hands early. Now, remember, this right now, today, it's August 28th. This doesn't come out in stores until September 19th. Now, I do believe if you pre-order it, you'll actually get, if you pre-order the physical and digital bundle, I should say, you'll have access, I think it's a week early. But still, with some of the more recent releases from Wizards of the Coast, even reviewers weren't seeing copies of stuff until a couple of days, 2-3 days before it hit stores. And our early access to do reviews was based on are D&D Beyond accounts, because if you're a reviewer of Dungeons and Dragons releases, you have a D&D Beyond account that the PR company that Wizards of the Coast uses will actually add the supplements or adventures or what have you to. So this has arrived really early. That's why I think the folks at Wizards of the Coast are very confident in this being a good, solid adventure release, because they want reviewers to have it and have plenty of time to go through it and probably sing its praises. The Infected Elder Brain. All right, I'm pretty sure I have jumped chapters. I think I was on chapter 6 when I kind of started discussing why I think that this is going to be a pretty good adventure. I also love how the Mind Flayer sort of has that Cthulhu facial look. Running this chapter, Rifts in Reality. The characters start this chapter knowing that a trio of Mind Flayers are preparing a ritual to transform surface-dwelling humanoids into Mind Flayers. That's kind of straight out of Baldur's Gate 3, which I have been enjoying tremendously. My group is 7th level now. We're in Act 2 after, I don't know, about 40 hours in Act 1. The ritual will certainly affect Phandelver. Yeah, you would think so. And it might wash over other small population pockets in the region. The exact perimeters of the ritual are up to you. If you decide that the characters are too easily vanquishing this adventure's challenges, you could decide that the Fanatic's ritual is nearly complete, urging the characters to press ahead without resting and resupplying. If this adventure's threats have significantly challenged the characters, you could tell them that they have a comfortable amount of time before the Fanatics can finish the ritual, and the heroes can rest and resupply as needed. Either option is viable. Myself, as a game master, I would probably not let them know either way. Let them kind of worry about it. Not that I would try to prevent them from resting and resupplying and everything, but I would kind of like drop hints and you don't know how long this ritual is going to take. They could be close to being done. But then again, that probably, a lot of that comes from my experience as a keeper running Call of Cthulhu adventures for over 40 years. I like to turn the screws a little on my players, make them worry, make them sweat. All right, so this is our Rifts in Reality. So it looks like this is where they're going to confront the Mind Flayers. This is where we had that infected elder brain. This looks like this is a pretty long chapter. It does appear that there's quite a bit to this adventure. Now, I know I have been discussing on the live show how we have seen the price increase across the industry for the most part, as far as role-playing game publishers. And yes, it is unfortunately a reality that's going to stay. It's not something that's temporary, I can pretty much guarantee. But if we see like the bundle where you have the D&D Beyond bundle where you get the physical book and the digital edition, if you order early enough, same MSRP as the physical book, then it's not so bad. But of course, there is the story out there that supposedly Wizards of the Coast wants to do away with physical books altogether. I think it's more Hasbro than Wizards of the Coast, but I don't know, there's just something about having a book in your hand. Although I enjoy reading PDFs, just something about having a book in your hand as a dungeon master. So Doom comes to Phandelver. Now that is a nod to Lovecraft right there. So this is Beyond a Lightless Star. Creeping transformations. Well, running this chapter, the fanatics have already begun their lengthy ritual. They believe themselves safely ensconced in Vash's domain called the Briny Maze. At the heart of the Briny Maze, Vash lurks in a vast empty pocket of psychic quasi-reality called the Endless Void. The characters must navigate the Briny Maze, overcoming its dangers and negotiating with potential allies before reaching the Endless Void and confronting the fanatics, as well as a psychic reflection of Yvash. All right. Oh, the Briny Maze looks like a brain. Oh, Githyaki. We get a dragon making an appearance here. Wonder if that's one of your potential allies. These are rather small maps. I mean, they're covering a fairly large area. Pretty small there. It's like we've got quite a few locations and encounters. Ilvash's refraction, which is a huge aberration. Nice. And wrapping up, we get a bit of an epilogue there. Then we get into our Bestiary, an aberrant zealot. Aberrant zealots are cultists who have reached out to the powers of the far realm only for something to reach back. Steeped in strange energy, aberrant zealots borrow their vicious might from the monstrous entities that inhabit that fell plane. The flesh meld. Squelching and quivering with insatiable hunger, a flesh meld is a hulking amalgamation of teeth, blood, and body parts. Yuck. Owes some inspiration to the chest burster from Alien. Mind Flayer Prophet. So we've got some mutated creatures. We've got psionic goblins. The specifics of how a psionic goblin comes to exist vary. Some are born, changed by energy leaking from the far realm. Others transform themselves with their psionic power or enter into agreements with other aberrations, which help them transform in return for their service as shock troops. All right, then we get into our magic items. This is our Appendix B. So we got some fresh items there. And then here's our story tracker. So it's just for, looks like it's just for the players to just note different things going on. And then we've got our map. So looks like, taking a guess, it is probably the map we just saw early on with the Sword Coast right there. Is that right there? Very nice. So that is a look inside Dungeons and Dragons, Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. So before I swing on over to the other camera, I'm going to tell you how you can get into the running to win this copy of the alternate art edition. So 3 things, pretty easy. Number 1, be a subscriber to the channel. You've got to be a subscriber to the channel to win any of the contests that I run. 2, thumb up the video. I know I can't tell if you do it or not, but I trust you. I believe that you'll give a thumbs up to the video. And then number 3, what I'd like you to do is comment what you feel is the most interesting low-level character class for Dungeons and Dragons and why. Can't just say Paladin and leave it at that. You can say Paladin and then tell me why you feel they are, to you, the most interesting low-level class. So that's it. And then I will choose one lucky viewer and I will reveal the winner of this copy right here during my review of Dungeons and Dragons, Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. So there you have it. So I will have my review out before this arrives in stores. That's something else that I always try to do. I try to give you kind of a heads up on what I think of the Dungeons and Dragons releases before they hit retail. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like the video, even if you don't necessarily want to get involved in the contest, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this first look, it'll also inform you when my live stream, The Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more that you won't find here on the YouTube channel. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you so much for watching the video. And until I see you next time, here's hoping you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.